Hello, and welcome to the Hobby Train. I'm your conductor, Nicholas Spade. Please hand in over your tickets, which are in the forms of likes, shares, and subscribe to the channel, so that way YouTube doesn't send us to Alaska. Now, here's your car for today. Enjoy. Thank you. Hello, friends. Let's start off with tennis, the slightly snobby car. So, first off, we're going to start off with the disclaimer, then moving to the history, then bouncing away all the way on to what it means for you to get rebound right back all the way over to what it means for your wallet. But first, that good old-fashioned disclaimer. Disclaimer: the video which you're about to see has information taken from different sources, such name sites will be in the description below. Also, I am not being paid by any company, league, union, or entity of any sort to promote their hobby or sport. Thank you, and enjoy the car. And now that we're back, we're going to go ahead and get served right into this. So, history for tennis, it goes by a few names, oddly enough. Lawn tennis, the real tennis in some places. Basically, yeah, one of those English Empire scattering and then kind of got named just due to local people naming it whatever they wanted to name it. But it was actually derived from a game called handball by the French. So if I butcher this, keep in mind I don't speak French. But Jeu de Paume. The only thing I can really derive from it is how we get the word palm, but for, the palm of your hand. Anyway, it was created about the 12th to 13th century when the sport came over to England. Now, when it came over to England, there were a couple guys who wrote books. There's one particular person who wrote a book about it. I'll mention him in a little bit, but just keep that in mind. So, basically, really when it came over to England, that's when it got the inclusion of a racket into it, and not, obviously your hand, So, a bit bigger of a catching target, if that makes any sense. So, obviously, tennis became very much a sport for kind of the well-to-do society, and we're going to get into why that is here in a little bit, especially when it comes to where you can play it and wallets. But, pretty much, it's also kind of due to the course itself. Originally, it was an hourglass course, not a square or rectangle that we know today. Which, since that means a very distinctive course, also means very hard to build. Now, I'm gonna be honest, I don't think I like doing any summoning rituals on an hourglass course. But then again, you don't know because people are weird. Anyway, as I mentioned, there was one person who did basically help establish tennis to become a major sport. And the first kind of league or club in this case was established in 1872 by a man named Harry Gem. Harry Gimme? Yes, I know, not exactly the most easy pronunciation, but it is what it is. Anyway, he tried to settle the sport and the rules following a booklet pronounced Sphasphatikite, which translates somehow to be tennis. I didn't write the book. I didn't write the title. That's all I can say. Written by Major Clorpton Wingfield. Okay. How does a guy who have like the most easy, simple name write a book with the most complicated title? I want to know this. No, he wrote it in 1870. He wrote it in 1873, which Harry Gamee tried to base most of the rules off of, which also seems to have helped spawn badminton because of it. We'll get into that one once we get to the badminton car, which will be later on, but kind of interesting. So one thing I found out is that tennis in itself really kind of spawned a few other sports as well. Badminton being one of them, and table tennis or ping pong, which yes will get its own video, was also another one as well. But moving off of that quick tangent, so basically because of how tennis has to be established in order to be played, that kind of restricted it really for the most influential people. And honestly, as time went on, that really didn't change too much. But tennis also has a few notes in history that are the most influential, that especially in the manosphere of really any game out there, period. Any sport. Can't really say this. And it was because in tennis, it actually kind of gave a claim for modern feminism. And if you're asking how is that possible, well, it's pretty simple. And I'm about to get to how. So in tennis, so in 1973, the Battle of the Sexes, which was a tennis match between Billie Jean King, who was 29 years old, played against a 55-year-old Bobby Riggs, who I believe at the time was like a champion. But rumor also has it that he definitely loved to live the rock star life. He got so hammered the night before the Battle of the Sexes that he wound up drunk, hungover, and so he really wasn't playing like to his optimal limit. I mean, to his optimal performance. It showed in the game, and of course, the men lost that game. And no discredit to Billie Jean King. She's probably a magnificent tennis player. But feminists basically kind of took that and ran with it, and that's how we have the song "Anything You Can Do, I Can Do Better." Anything you can do, I can do it better than you. Well, that's how this whole thing started, and we've seen where that has wound up today. Especially with good old-fashioned transgender coming into women's sports and dominating. So now with that, tennis kind of hasn't really, it's picked up in its own little world, but like again like I said, that's its own little world. It really didn't come to dominate the mainstream media really until about the 80s and 90s, when Venus and Serena Williams both came onto the tennis scene and were dominating the court, dominating the sport really for all intents and purposes. Not saying that either of them still do now, but I'm pretty sure, I think one did say she wanted to retire for to start a family and everything else of that nature. So, and again, that's back out of the history of tennis. Now, of course, like I mentioned, it did spawn ping pong, which is called indoor tennis. Same rules apply. same agility applies, except for it's a table, so it's massively smaller. And you can play it on rainy, hot, cold, and wet days. Why is this important? It'll be important when I start getting into the details of tennis. Which is, where do you play tennis? And that leads us into what this means for you. So what this does mean for you is that, well, tennis is a very kind of hard sport to find places to play because it's expensive. I mean, it's expensive to build one of these tennis courts. And what do I mean by that? Well, first of all, we're gonna go off with the whole basic fun thing of that. Very shortly after the hourglass court was introduced, it was ditched in favor of the rectangle or square course that we know nowadays. And that's the way it's been kind of kept. Well, because it's been kept in that particular fashion, nowadays that means in order to create a tennis court, you have to dig out, flatten a whole square, and basically about the length of 2 basketball courts, full courts, by the way, and then pour concrete into them, and then pour two types of rubber, really, just to make up a tennis court, plus the metal spikes and little areas where the poles for the net goes in. So then you also got to put in the lights as well. So yeah, not the most cheap thing to build. And again, when you can use half that concrete and get a basketball court versus double the concrete and get a tennis court, that's why you don't find it in most parks. So with that being said, a lot of places that tend to have these are country clubs and upscale neighborhoods, and also indoor sporting arenas. Now, for country clubs, it makes sense. Indoor sporting arenas, it makes sense. But what you have a harder time with is neighborhoods. Usually the kind of more upscale neighborhoods, they have them, and they really just go to waste. In fact, I remember one upscale neighborhood I used to be around and by, where they boasted 3 tennis courts. And these 3 tennis courts, only one of them really got used. The other 2 wound up being taken over by the local kids to make a skate park, and it didn't really go anywhere. So the courts literally just sit there going to waste because the soil that it's on has shifted badly and broken up the concrete. Of course, keep in mind that that court's probably like 30-40 years old. That happens. So that's also another drawback. But a big one is it's a fair weather sport. It's only really the professionals you see who play in rain or shine, but they don't play in, well, cold, and definitely not in the hot. What I mean by that is, like summer weather, especially whenever you get into borderline double digits, you can't play on a tennis court because the rubber is reflecting all that heat right back at you, so you feel like you are literally playing in triple digit weather, even though it's not. And especially whenever the sun beats down on you. So that alone is very exhausting. And that's why, yeah, a lot of times tennis courts, you might see them and no one's actually using them, or very few people are using them. that's kind of why it's a very fair weather sport. But now we're gonna get into the rules, because the rules don't help the game much either. What I mean by that is that it doesn't help it, especially when you're dealing with how do I say, if it's a triple digit degree and you're expecting you're expecting most people to run around. Eesh. But that's exactly what the rules for tennis are. So, simple rules are: one person, let's just say you, have a racket and you have a ball. Your job is to hit the ball and make it bounce on the other side of the net towards the other person. So the other person with their own racket has to run, catch up to said ball, whack it back over the net to where it hits in your court and bounces. Then you have to whack it back again. Yes, you will be playing following the ball most of the time. Especially with your eyes. And you do this until somebody fails to bounce the ball back and catch it correctly. So that means if you served the ball or put into play, you hit it, it bounced into your opposing player's court, and they miss their racket swing to send the ball to the other side, and it bounces again, you get a point. If that happens vice versa to you, well, they get a point. Okay? Now, because of this, you're going to be running around a lot. But don't worry, it never fails. You can play both singles or doubles. Singles being obvious. Doubles means with a partner, which does change the game dramatically. Because now you have to think about what happens when your partner is there or not. Which, of course, brings up the everly fun topic of who can play with you. Yes, let's just get this out of the way. Yes, tennis is a co-ed sport. Me mentioning the Williams sisters alone should have given you that one. To bad team cohesion. So, also, tennis picked up a bit of a reputation, especially kind of in the 80s and 90s, even a little bit later into the 2000s, that lonely rich housewives back in the day would basically go use their husband's money, pay for tennis lessons, only to hit on their tennis coach. Get more into that. Hit on their tennis coach while there. Now, whether or not these tennis coaches did anything with it that probably depends on tennis coach to tennis coach, but you get the idea. Also, because of the rules of tennis, if you were paying attention, it's a very vigorous sport, so expect not very modest clothing to be worn playing tennis, because it's a very physical sport. Now, I'm also going to add another piece in, that also this is why couples used to play tennis as doubles, because, well, it kind of showed how they would show each other how cohesive their marriage was, because as in playing doubles, you have to rely on your partner. But due to the fact that it's still physical, but not a contact sport, can you get sued? Well, as long as you don't go to your locker at the same time as the other person does, and you go to your locker, it's very hard to put that type of lawsuit into action. Other than that, it should be good. But like I said, it's physical. Now, how physical can it be? Well, first of all, the fact that this sport actually has an injury named after it, that tells you a lot. Tennis is a very active and reactive sport, so you gotta be pretty fast. It's very intensive. It's a very intensive energy, stamina, strength, control, and speed sport. I mean, you've got to be pretty agile to play the game. Which of course will wear on your ankles, your knees, your shoulders, and of course your tennis elbow. Now you know where that came from. So yes, Dr. Bills will of course kind of ensue. Now, we're going to move on to the next section, the fun section, the scary section of what does this mean for your wallet? So, what this means for your wallet is tennis is not cheap at all. If someone says tennis is cheap, they're going to sell you swampland. I'm just saying that, saying it's prime real estate. And why do I say this? It's because, well, a basic tennis racket, a bare bones basic tennis racket, goes for about $100. Shoes go for about $70. Balls, the tennis balls, don't read too much into that, go for about $20. Clothing, $100. A racket bag is about $50. All in all, totals about $340. Well, that doesn't sound expensive, right? And this is where you're wrong! It actually costs more, because tennis is one of these sports that you cannot start in it in pickup games. That's right, there's no such thing as pickup games in tennis. Well, if you have other people who are willing to play, sure, but very rarely. Tennis starts out with tennis lessons, which start at $100 a lesson. And no, you won't just pay for one. You'll pay for many. Get over it. It's the price of the game. Because you'll pay for many, it's gonna add up. Your wallet's gonna be hurting a lot. But with that also being said, there's not really a whole scouting league for tennis players. I'm not sure fully how it works. It's kind of vague, but you basically play matches, and once you get well enough into or through with your training, you start to play those matches, and that's probably how you get sponsored and scouted. But during this time, you gotta keep in mind that, yeah, it's expensive, but once you get picked up, it pays off. Yes, your wallet will hurt, but if you play pro tennis, that means in any pro league within any country that has tennis, you're looking at just average player a little over $1 million United States dollars per year. Per year. That's right, $1 million per year. And most average tennis players have a play life or play time of 14 years. That's their usual career life. Just on playing tennis. And that's with no endorsements, by the way. That's just winning prize money. So when you add all that up, yeah, your wall might be sore at first, but it'll be eased off in the long run. So, with that, we're going to conclude this card. Tennis is a sport that does take a lot out of your lot into account, such as monetary investment, physical health, and, well, just being tiring and draining, especially if you live in a borderline desert state or country. But if you enjoy whacking a ball around with a racket, hey, be my guest. It'll pay off dividends, especially if you get really good at it in the long run. Well, here's the station. Next week, it might be a little bit. It might get a little bit of a short car, and then going off to a short station. But we're gonna get medieval on your hiney with archery, and I'll see you at the next station.